West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The investigation into former President Donald Trump's business empire is expanding. The New York Attorney General's office put out a statement last night saying the investigation into the Trump organization is now considered a criminal matter, in addition to the ongoing civil probe. The statement reads in part, "We have informed the Trump organization that our investigation into the organization is no longer purely civil in nature. We are now actively investigating the Trump organization in a criminal capacity, along with the Manhattan District Attorney." New York Attorney General Letitia James has been at the forefront of legal action against Trump's family business. Her office offered no explanation for what prompted the change in its investigation. The Washington Post points out that the danger previously posed by James's investigation seemed to be merely financial. The kind of lawsuit Trump had faced from New York attorneys general before over Trump University and his charity. Now, however, James could also seek criminal penalties. An attorney for the Trump organization declined to comment on the matter. Trump and his representatives have repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. Joe?
Yeah, Jonathan Lemire, I've been growing impatient over the past months over leaks from the FBI and other prosecutors. Saying this, behind the scenes, we hear this or that or whatever. I've now read 437 articles about how what happened today makes Matt Gaetz' situation worse. I keep reading about Rudy Giuliani. We got used to this during the Trump era. A leak here, a leak there. Oh, they're sure to go to jail. It happened back during the Bush era. Karl Rove, as I've said before, every Friday they'd say, hey, make sure you're around to go to the TV studio. Karl Rove, this is the day. We just heard from the FBI a leak that Karl Rove's going to go to jail, blah, blah. I say all that to say this wasn't a leak. This actually was from the office. I don't know if that means anything. I'm not sure about why you announced we are now investigating him for criminal. Do your investigation, bring the charges, or don't bring the charges. But again, this really wasn't a leak. This is the office basically saying we're looking into criminal charges against Donald Trump.
Yeah, Joe, you've made your feelings about leaks pretty well known in recent weeks. But no, this is a highly unusual statement, though, even if it comes out the front door of the office. Not a leak, but rather a planned statement from a spokesperson from the Attorney General's office, confirming that they are now looking into a criminal matter, but not just a civil one. That's not something we hear very often from offices like this, but certainly it ramps up the pressure on the former president and his business, the Trump Organization. We know that this has been an investigation that's long in the works, that some of the president's closest allies have been interviewed in the recent months, including his adult children, Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr., who have been running the business while Donald Trump was in office, as well as some of the top officials at the Trump Organization, like Michael Cohen and Alan Weisberg. So that evidence, those testimony, has been collected over the recent months. Now, what exactly they're looking at here remains, of course, somewhat of a mystery. It's the Trump Organization's businesses, it's tax procedures. These are the things that they are looking at. But to go through a criminal matter, inherently, of course, is a far bigger deal than civil. Now, whether this leads to charges or not, unclear. That certainly doesn't say that. What kind of timeline we're working on now? Unclear. But it's also, we know that there are these investigations from the Manhattan District Attorney, Cy Vance, the Attorney General, Letitia James, herself, former politician, longtime adversary of Donald Trump and the Trump Organization. So we will see in the coming days, weeks, months, where this leads. But certainly, at minimum, we know the former president faces some legal jeopardy coming out of office, potentially in a few jurisdictions, and it's ramping up in New York.
Let's bring in a couple more legal voices to help understand this. Boston Globe columnist and a former trial and appellate litigation attorney, Kimberly Atkins. She's an MSNBC contributor and co-host of the Sisters-in-Law podcast, along with Joyce Vance, Jill Wine-Banks, and Barbara McQuaid, all familiar voices and faces on this network. Also with us, MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalos. Good morning to you both. So, Danny, let me begin with you. Just in plain terms, why is this a significant announcement, if you believe it is?
Simply put, it's more investigative power going into the criminal side of the investigation. Now, the New York State Attorney General, like other attorneys general, has a broader role than, say, a district attorney's office, because they investigate civil matters, such as charities that are not living up to their charitable status. They investigate all kinds of different consumer protection issues. They also are a law enforcement branch. So in that sense, they have a much more diverse set of interests. So for the Attorney General to add to its investigation, a previously civil investigation, that this is a criminal investigation, of course, they're still investigating violations of New York state law, just like the Manhattan District Attorney's Office would be. But that tells you there's a lot more man and woman power going into this investigation now, this criminal side, than previously thought.
And Kimberly, looking at Letitia James, and she's been following problems that she's been seeing happening in the Trump Organization and toward the presidency for his entire presidency. Could this branch out to family members? Are there any indication as to how widespread this is?
Yeah, so the answer is it could. We don't know yet. We only have this one brief statement that came out of the state attorney general's office. But the difference between a civil matter and what we saw, for example, with the Trump charity, where the charity was shut down, people involved in it were no longer able to run charities. With a criminal investigation, it brings in other elements as well. If there was criminality suspected based on what she has found, depending on who it is, you might get somebody who may be facing charges, who may be pressed to perhaps cooperate in advancing that investigation. We know, as we already stated, that they have already talked to folks like Michael Cohen. So when you have a criminal investigation like that, it can sprawl out as that investigation moves forward. So perhaps that was one reason for announcing this, just to put people on notice about that. But, like we said, there is a broad ability here to with this expansion of the investigation. It's reported that it is not just what District Attorney Cy Vance in Manhattan is investigating, that there is some overlap between these two, but that they are separate. But that can mean there could also be sharing of information between the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and the State Attorney General. It's certainly a ramp up. We don't know exactly where it's going or how broad it is yet, but it certainly isn't good news for the Trump Organization.
Hey, Danny, let's deliberately get ahead of ourselves here. There's been some talk about the concept of extradition, and about the former president, who, of course, faces legal scrutiny in a number of places. New York, we've discussed, also Georgia, the District of Columbia, because of the events of January 6th. And there's been some thought that if he is, say, in one of his homes, whether it's Florida or New Jersey, that perhaps there would be an extradition effort to bring him back to New York if he were to eventually face charges. Can you walk us through what this all means and how it would work, if someone can stop extradition, whether it can happen, whether this is something we should really be considering in the months ahead?
It would work very easily for the government agency that is prosecuting someone if he's in the United States. Former President Trump would have to be in his house in Saudi Arabia or Brazil for extradition to pose any barrier to the New York State Attorney General or any law enforcement authority in New York to bring him back. Procedurally, it's a simple process. Let's say, for example, someone's in Florida, they're arrested, you want to bring them back to New York. There's a hearing in Florida, a relatively brief hearing. The defendant is not going to be able to oppose extradition in between states. It could be said that all the United States have extradition treaties with each other, and that treaty is you can have whoever you want, because there really isn't any ability of a state to hold on to someone and keep another state from prosecuting them. Finding them, tracking them down, serving an arrest warrant on them in another state, that can create procedural complexities, but it's nothing that a little interstate cooperation among law enforcement can't solve.
It is Wednesday, the 19th of May of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Speaking of gatekeepers, well, yes, it's happened again. Almost like a broken record, and I apologize for, ranting on this subject. Once again, it seems to happen quite often, quite regularly, almost like it was a plan. I don't know. It's hard not to fall into the conspiracies. But, I've been suspended now from Facebook for 30 days. I lasted, just a little less than 4 days from my previous 7-day suspension. And this is what I don't understand. I was suspended before for bullying when a maggot threatened to find me in town and beat my ass. And all I said was, okay, beat me up. And that was enough for me to get suspended. But the person who said they were going to find me and beat me up is still out there posting away on Facebook. So I was in a little, and it wasn't even a back and forth. It was a back and forth indeed, but it wasn't anything untoward. There was no yelling. There was no swearing. Except on the other side, being called a fucking commie, a socialist, a baby killer. What were we speaking about? The death penalty. Where you had the usual suspects saying, we have a God-given right to kill somebody. No one who is threatened, they're just going to kill that person who threatened them. Which beggars a question, well, shouldn't there be some sort of oversight about who feels threatened and what they're feeling threatened over? Because anybody can just say, I felt threatened, so I killed them. I am justified. And all I said was, I don't think it's right to kill anybody at any time. And for that, the F-bombs were dropped. I'm a commie, I'm a socialist, I'm a baby killer. So, of course, I always love the line of arguments that they bring up. And this one was actually brought up by a guy who has changed his account numerous times in violation of the terms of service at Facebook. And at first I didn't recognize who it was. There's this guy who's pretty much of an anti-government guy and, kind of a young hippie guy, somebody in his 20s, I presume. And he has a herd of goats, and he lives out in the fields, and he tries to get the city of Ashland to hire him to mow hillsides or what with his goats. But he is virulently anti-government, virulently pretty much what I call a pot-growing Nazi, because there's a lot of them around here. And they have been exposed, too, and they don't like being exposed for being Nazis. Anyway, I didn't recognize who it was at first, and I probably would have not engaged. I didn't recognize him. Now, I'll repeat. This person has been violating terms of use on Facebook repeatedly, not just by, dropping F-bombs and threatening people and all this other BS, but by changing accounts when he's caught. Facebook tends to not do anything to those guys. The other person who had threatened to beat me up, who I said, okay, go ahead, beat me up, and then I'm suspended for being a bully, he's still tweeting there under his account. So I'm trying to figure out what is up here. Because since last year, I have been suspended right around the time some major news is coming up. Now, I'm just a small guy. I mean, in terms of influence. I'm not a very small guy in stature. In fact, I like to tell people I'm part of the expanding universe. Anyway, I'm just a small public figure, very minuscule, but there's a lot of us out there, and it seems like they shut us all up around the time some major breaking news is coming out, or an election. Just very convenient on that side. So what was I suspended for this time? Well, a variation on Swift's A Modest Proposal. This goat boy, this goat herder, did the typical argument of like, well, do you eat meat? Because, I said it's wrong to kill anybody at any time. And I know where that argument's going, especially from a Nazi, because Hitler was a vegetarian, and, if Hitler was a vegetarian, that's good. Well, yeah, it's good that you're a vegetarian. But whether I eat meat or not is immaterial whether I can hold a moral opinion on whether the death penalty is wrong, or whether if someone is attacking me, I have the right to kill them. I do not have a right to kill them. There's no God-given right for that. And I was piled on. So instead of answering or just ignoring, which I should have just done, because I did, I was pretty busy. So I don't really have time to get into this back and forth. And I responded, well, in a pinch, if I had to, I guess I could be forced to eat you. But only if your demise is brought on by some natural occurrence and that it's not catching. And of course, that fellow retorted, "You're a hypocrite! You're not vegan!" What an idiot. So I said, okay, I won't eat you then. And I was suspended for threatening this guy's life. Wait. I told the guy, well, I guess I got to be forced to eat you for the common good, but only if you died of natural causes. That wasn't of anything that I might catch, like a disease. I reviewed it initially, or I appealed initially just to the regular algorithm, because I'm trying to figure out, how did the algorithm bypass the harassment I get for being called an effing commie, an effing socialist, an effing baby killer? And that, how is that not an issue? When I've reported these people, it comes back, no, it doesn't violate our terms of use. But I posted last year a GIF of the crying cheerleader from Glee. And that was reported as sexual harassment that depicted rape. I had appealed to the initial review, and they said, nope, it violates our terms of use. It depicts rape. A fully clothed teenager in a car during a rainstorm crying from Glee. Now, I've been told, oh, well, the algorithm has you. Well, it'd be nice to know what it is that's verboten. I make a joke based upon Swift's A Modest Proposal. But, just a reminder, that was that we can bring down the national debt of the UK if we just eat all of these Irish kids. In today's new Agogo world, Swift would be suspended from Facebook for threatening the lives of all those Irish kids. It's droll. These cretins at Facebook are so uneducated. And I am so pissed that I, as a 66-year-old grandfather, is being reviewed by a bunch of uneducated 20-somethings who know nothing, who have no life experience, and they haven't read the basis of the English literature canon. Why am I being judged by that? Now, I reviewed to their oversight board, and they make it very clear that, we have a lot coming in, and we may not even be able to get to you. But if you want to continue, they threaten you with being doxxed. They threaten to turn over all of your information to the media, and they threaten that the media will be knocking on your door to ask you a question. Pretty much to entice people not to appeal through their oversight board. Well, I don't care. Everybody knows who I am. They know where I live. I've never hidden any of that. I don't post under a nom de plume. That's me. That's my legal real name, Royal Justice Putnam. Roy for short. More people know me as Justice than know me as Roy. I've been threatened with Google satellite images of "we know where you live." Yeah, report that. And they go, "Oh, no, that doesn't violate terms of use." Joke that, "Oh, well, I don't know. If I was really starving, I guess I could be forced to eat you." That is wishing someone dead. And I know a lot of people say, "Well, why are you even on Facebook? Just stop your account." Well, it's a little hard, isn't it? How about not having these stupid, once again, I went through the oversight board's terms of use. And, after they threatened to dox you, after they threatened to call the media, come knocking on your door, then they say, well, read these terms of use and see if you've been in violation of any of this. And it is pretty much directed towards harassing kids. But I am not harassing a kid. I'm not harassing anybody, to be honest with you. I'm answering a question with humor to an adult, using the well-worn, well-known Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal. I guess I could eat you for the common good. So, right before the New York AG announces that they have opened up a criminal investigation into the Trump organization. It's funny, last year I was suspended just a day before the January 6th insurrection. Convenient. Coincidental. I was suspended before the November election, a week before. Coincidental. I wonder. It's hard not to fall into the morass of conspiratorial thought, isn't it? But it seems just a little too convenient by half. It happens too often, under the most ridiculous reasons that have nothing to do with harassment, have nothing to do with anything. A liberal posts something, A conservative right-wing Nazi complains. A conservative right-wing Nazi can actually threaten you with physical violence. And if you say, okay, go ahead, do it, you are the bully. I call that the basketball rules of social intercourse. It's not the initial action that's called the foul. It's the reaction to it, no matter how benign. You don't even have to touch the guy. You lift your hand to your head, they'll say, that was a foul. But it's not justice, and that was no pun intended. Well, enough of that rigmarole. We actually have a curated show. And F Facebook and F Zuckerberg, anyway, is Rita Babe pick site. We know the morality that they have endeavored in. All right. Anyway, we do have a full-on show for you today, and it's great because we did start off at the top with Joe and Mika discussing the New York Attorney General opening up a criminal investigation into the Trump organization. A very rare occurrence, by the way. Not very many Nazi former presidents have been indicted under a criminal charge. Because we haven't really had much in the way of Nazi former presidents. Yeah, you can say Nixon, but he wasn't a Nazi. Okay. Not like what we have now with an actual hostile foreign power in cahoots with the former guy to destroy America. So it's another curiosity just to get back to the stupid Facebook thing. That the anti-maskers are out there, the anti-vaxxers are out there. The anti-government people are out there on Facebook posting away. Anybody challenges them, those people are suspended. They're canceled. And there's nothing you can do about it. And if you do, you run the risk of being doxxed. Having the media knock on your door and letting everybody know who you are. I should report the oversight board for threats. Threats to my safety. It's so ludicrous. Oh, well. Anyway, let's get back to what we have in terms of the curated show for the rest of the day here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the hour, actually. In the Bistro Cafe part, the House GOP is trying to weaken Capitol security and build Trump's wall instead. Diversionary tactic. Biden is set to restore legal aid for low-income and minority Americans that was shut down under Trump. And Oregon is about to become the 14th state to ban fear of gay people as a murder defense. Yeah, in this death penalty debate, people were going on and on and on. Well, if somebody comes up and threatens me, I can just shoot them because I feared for my life. All right. I guess those cops that killed Tamir Rice, they claimed and got off because they feared for their lives. A 12-year-old was playing in the snow, playing cops and robbers, and he had what looked like a real gun. They feared for their lives, so they had to shoot him. God gave them that right. And the law said, you know what? They feared for their lives. And then when you say, well, maybe we should get the guns out of people's hands because too many people are fearing for their lives, you'll be suspended for being a bully. And after the break, we move to the chef's table where a Kenyan guard who wrote compelling dispatches about living as a low-wage worker in Qatar has been detained under unclear circumstances. So I guess it could have been worse for me. I'm just merely suspended. And the famed Darwin's Arch in the Galapagos Islands has lost its top due to natural erosion of the stone. Time marches on. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. And, of course, the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And thank you, Kelly, for doing so. If you would look across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, there is the link to our Patreon site. And we have that there because though the bulk of how we continue this powerhouse of resistance comes out of our own wallets, we would still be unable to do it without your help. And if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, we pool that with others so inclined, plus what we pull out of our own wallets. We pay our bills, we fly under the radar, and we continue resistance broadcasting as the founders originally intended so many years ago. Thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I take care of me because, well, there's no one else left, darn it. No, all kidding aside, there's all sorts of people who care. Anyway, I am at Justice Putnam on Twitter, so follow me there. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media sites like Twitter. Won't be doing it on Facebook for a while because, well, that's the way the cookie crumbles. And other social media sites other than Facebook, so look for it, but they're on Twitter. So look for those show notes and links. They're very important. That is where the real reportage is. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Wow, I wonder if that alone would get me suspended from Facebook because I'm threatening violence. No, it's a velvety hollandaise sauce on a lovely egg dish. Please. They have no idea how the world works. Anyway, Emily Singer of the American Independent brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Congress is set to vote this week, and it's already the middle of the week, on a bill that would dramatically increase security funding for the Capitol complex in response to the rioting there by supporters of Donald Trump on January 6. The $1.9 billion bill includes funding to do everything from better training and protecting Capitol police officers to funding mental health support for officers still suffering trauma from the attack to reimbursing the District of Columbia for the costs it incurred in responding to the insurrection. Well, Trump still hasn't paid municipalities for his campaign events. What makes you think a maggot wants to support the traitors that fought against them? Think about it. Now, this reporting has come out of the roll call initially, and they reported that it's unclear whether Republican lawmakers in both the House and Senate, many of whom told the very lies that helped lead to the deadly attack on the Capitol, support the proposed funding increases. What's more, a handful of House Republicans are trying to weaken the bill. For example, Representative Bob Good, Repug from Virginia, filed an amendment to take $350 million meant to bolster the emergency response at the Capitol and instead use it to build Trump's border wall. An amendment introduced by Representatives Lauren Boebert and Ted Budd would prohibit security funding from going toward maintaining the magnetometers outside the House chamber. And none of the funds appropriated or otherwise made available by this act may be used to procure, install, operate, or maintain metal detectors to screen members of Congress entering the hall of the House, the amendment reads. Well, Boebert has been a major opponent of the use of metal detectors at points of access to the House floor, the use of which was instituted after the insurrection amid reports that GOP lawmakers might be trying to illegally bring guns into the chamber. The same ones who were directing the insurrection from inside the chamber want to bring guns into the House illegally. Last week, some GOP lawmakers sought to whitewash the insurrection in which a pro-Trump mob broke into the Capitol in an effort to stop Congress from certifying President Joe Biden's victory. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy came out in opposition to a bipartisan commission to investigate the insurrection, saying that he wanted to look into events that had nothing to do with the attack in Washington because Antifa and Black Lives Matter is a scary thing to racists that vote for the maggots. Wait a second. Maggots vote for MAGA policies. There. That's how we make that clear. And Representative Liz Cheney said that some GOP lawmakers may actually be implicated in the findings of such a commission. You know, laundered money from Russia. Every GOP member took money from the NRA, and that money was laundered from Russia. What if they got it directly from some handler? Makes one wonder. You think that maybe a commission might expose that? House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said a vote is scheduled tomorrow, Thursday, on the funding for Capitol security. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes from the Associated Press by way of the American Independent. President Joe Biden plans to take executive action to ensure minorities, low-income Americans, and others have better access to quality legal representation after services dwindled during the Trump administration. Biden signed a memorandum yesterday, Tuesday, directing the Department of Justice to restore key functions of the Shuttered Access to Justice Office and to reestablish the White House Legal Aid Interagency Roundtable. The plans are laid out in a presidential memo first shared with the Associated Press. The White House said that Biden was directing the roundtable to examine the impact that the coronavirus pandemic has had on access to justice in both civil and criminal matters. The pandemic has further exposed and exacerbated inequities in our justice system as legal services were curtailed, Biden wrote. He added that the problems have touched the lives of many persons in this country, particularly low-income people and people of color. You know, the people that the maggots say don't really matter. Tuesday's memo is Biden's latest step to work toward reforming the criminal justice system and advancing racial equity. It comes almost a year after the death of George Floyd sparked global protests and demands for actions to address structural racism. It builds on an executive order Biden signed on his first day in office, establishing an initiative to prioritize equity in government operations. His proposed budget seeks $1.5 billion to strengthen state and local criminal justice systems, including public defenders. White House officials said the latest step will build on those efforts. Casey Quinlan of the American Independent brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Oregon is set to ban a cruel legal strategy that uses victims' own sexual orientation and gender against them to justify their killings in court. In doing so, it would join a number of other states that have prohibited this practice, widely known as the panic defense. The legislation, SB 704, would block defendants accused of second-degree murder from citing a victim's actual or perceived gender, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation as part of an extreme emotional disturbance defense. In layman's terms, it would prohibit defendants from arguing that a sudden awareness of the victim's sexual orientation or gender identity in some way prompted the violence against the victim, provoking the defendant to act in self-defense. So I was in a discussion on Facebook about the death penalty and people's right to kill someone right in front of them if they feel threatened, the panic defense. And I opposed the panic defense. And yet I was suspended from Facebook for harassment and bullying. That's how it works. Now I'll just say, it's just so convenient. It seems so very, very convenient. The legislation states that the ban includes situations in which the victim made a romantic or sexual advance that was unwanted, but did not involve force toward the defendant. Like, how many times has a trans prostitute been killed? And then the defense was, well, when I found out it wasn't a woman, it scared me and I had to kill him. And the court said, yeah, that sounds justified. The legislation is currently sitting on Democratic Governor Kate Brown's desk, awaiting her signature. As of May 10, 13 states and the District of Columbia have enacted similar laws, according to the Movement Advancement Project, which tracks these kinds of bans. If Brown signs the bill, it would make Oregon the third state this year to prohibit the panic defense legal strategy, following Virginia and Vermont. Well, we should go to our break since I had such an elongated rant at the top. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Retro Spy. Originally entitled Ironbark for the code name of the real-life Russian protagonist in the story, the movie The Courier is a quiet but engaging spy thriller in the British tradition. It is, in fact, based on true events that form part of the backstory to the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's not a complicated tale. Affable British businessman Greville Wynne is recruited by MI6 as a courier because of his ongoing successful sales efforts in the then-communist Eastern Europe. Upon the natural-looking expansion of his operation to the Soviet Union, he makes contact with Oleg Penkovsky, a connected and senior bureaucrat whose portfolio includes not only trade, but also access to military information. Negatively impressed with Nikita Khrushchev and the irresponsibility of his plans to place missiles in Cuba, he agrees to supply information he believes will ratchet down tensions. The movie is mostly the story of the relationship between Penkovsky, played by veteran Mirab Ninids, and that of Wynne, brought off by Benedict Cumberbatch, as the stakes ever so slowly increase. That's actually a good part of what makes this one work. In the first act, there's almost a light feel to the proceedings, as Wynne can't believe he's lunching with spies. Later, though, we see the craft before the final act where the consequences of Penkovsky's idealism and Wynne's loyalty hit home. In one pivotal scene before the really heavy chapters begin, the two are seen in facial close-up watching a performance of Swan Lake. Their expressions, alongside the performance, presage the rest of the story, which is why directors choose players this good. The Courier is a smart spy flick with no explosions or gunfire and an effective period piece. It's a must-see for fans of the genre. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. No one has ever seen a Tyrannosaurus walk. Still, movies like Jurassic Park have guessed how fast it would have done that. Now scientists have used the skeleton of a T-Rex to model the biomechanics of the animal's stride, and they've estimated it strutted at a leisurely pace, on par with humans, ostriches, elephants, and giraffes.
And it's not just limited to those animals, horses, gazelles, gnus. Turns out that actually most animals don't tend to walk super fast.
Pasha van Bijlert is a movement scientist at Vrije University in Amsterdam. His team studied the skeleton of a T-Rex housed in a Dutch museum. The specimen, nicknamed Trix, is exceptionally well preserved, so they were able to see how ligaments would have attached to and linked the animal's tailbones. Those ligaments, they would have acted like rubber bands, and the researchers used mathematical modeling to study how they would have given the tail bounce as the T-Rex walked. The animal could have taken advantage of that natural bouncy rhythm to save energy as it moved.
That is basically resonance. You get more movement for less effort if you choose the correct rhythm at which you do things.
So that helped them estimate the beat at which T-Rex would have pounded its feet. But to determine speed, they still needed to know how far each step was.
And to do that, we found a fossilized trackway of a slightly smaller tyrannosaurid, scaled it up to the size of our T-Rex, and that gives you a step length.
Multiply step length by step rhythm, and you get a speed of 1.28 meters per second, or about 2.9 miles per hour. The results were published by the Royal Society. Van Bijlert says he's seen a lot of headlines stating that humans could have outpaced T-Rex. Not so, he says, once the animal started running.
I guess we should be glad that there's a lot of time between us and T-Rex.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Democracy is dying in Florida.
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The Florida legislature has passed a bill that will limit voting by mail. Voting by mail, as the 2020 presidential election proved, is safe and secure and allows millions of people who without it can't vote to vote. So, Florida elected officials have in essence said, never again, we're putting an end to that. And they have. The bill also limits the number of drop boxes, which, again, as the 2020 election proved, are safe and secure and allow people who can't stand in line at a polling place for hours on Election Day to cast a ballot. So, greatly reducing drop boxes prevents eligible voters from voting, which is the effect, and let's be frank, the purpose of this law. The big push in Florida and across the country to torpedo the right to vote is based on no facts, just the specious, demonstrably false claim about fraud in the 2020 election. Voter election officials in Florida call the legislation unnecessary and a travesty. Florida is now a leader in the nationwide voter suppression movement, along with Georgia, Texas, and Iowa, and Michigan and Arizona are not far behind. It's this simple. Voting is the foundation of a representative democracy. If people can't vote, democracy dies. Voting, and therefore democracy, is under grave attack. Right now, today, this very moment.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1950. That was the day 31 dock workers were killed and hundreds more were injured in an explosion at the Raritan River Port in South Amboy, New Jersey. Workers were loading ammunition from freight trains onto ships. The freight's ultimate destination was Pakistan. Practically every structure in South Amboy suffered some form of serious or structural damage, with windows blown out everywhere and debris reported as far as 25 miles away. 5,800 more unexploded anti-personnel mines had been strewn about the port. Demolition experts had to be called in for removal. A subsequent fire at a nearby agricultural phosphorus plant complicated their work. The blast was caused by the detonation of 150 tons of military explosives and gelatin dynamite. The piers, equipment, and railroad cars were all demolished. Over a dozen nearby barges were either on fire or sank. Emergency operations went into effect and a state of emergency was declared. Key industries in the immediate area were seriously damaged, including the International Smelting and Refining Company, Pennsylvania Railroad maintenance shops, and the power plant for New Jersey Power and Light. According to a report by the National Board of Fire Underwriters and the Fire Insurance Rating Organization of New Jersey, packing of the mines and fuses by the Kilgore Company was not in accordance with Army standards, and labeling was confusing. The shipped mines were labeled as M1A1, though all parts but the detonator were identical to M1 mines, discontinued by the Army in 1942 for their apparent defective fuse, leading to accidental firing and explosions. The report refrained from drawing a certain cause or assigning blame. Instead, the underwriters offered a number of possible scenarios and recommendations for best practices to be implemented. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only 58 to 60 today. Partly cloudy skies this morning will give way to an occasional shower during the afternoon. Winds out of the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And then partly cloudy skies early will give way to cloudy skies late. Slight chance of rain tonight, though the lows will be under 40. Ouch. Mostly cloudy tomorrow, with highs again around 59 to 60. Slight chance of a rain shower, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County, in the southern part of Oregon, have increased once again to 10,999. That is an increase of about 30. And we have also increased the amount of people dead, confirmed dead, now stands at 141 in our county. Take off your mask, folks. Everything's okay. I kid. Because Facebook might find out and think that I'm being serious. Jeez, these people. Anyway, grass pollen is rated very high outside the window in Rogue River here. The air quality index for the region is good at 33 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is very high at 8. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.15 inches. Visibility is still up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 73%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 62 and partly cloudy. Paris is 58 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 70 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 58 with a light rain shower. Kabul is 73 and fair. Hong Kong is 82 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 64 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 and clear. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 78 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world. Brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. John Gambrell of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A Kenyan who wrote compelling dispatches under a pseudonym about the challenges of living as a low-wage worker in Qatar and advocated for their rights has been detained under unclear circumstances in the energy-rich nation. The arrest of Malcolm Badali draws renewed attention on the limits of expression in a nation that will host the upcoming 2022 FIFA World Cup. It also highlights the challenge many migrant laborers face when agreeing to the opportunity of steady work in Gulf Arab states in exchange for long shifts doing menial work in the shadows of skyscrapers they helped build. Supporters say Qatari security forces detained Badali late on May 4th and have not provided information on where he is. The Qatari government, responding to questions from the AP, described Badali as being taken into custody and placed under investigation for violating Qatar's security laws and regulations. And the government declined to offer specifics on the arrest, where he was being held, whether he received consular assistance, and what potential charges he is facing. Badali, age 28, worked 12-hour days as a security guard. In his spare time, he wrote under the pen name Noah about his experiences as a guard, including trying to improve his worker accommodations. His essays offered plaudits for Qatar, at times as a trendsetter in many areas. However, he did not hold back in describing the cramped bedrooms some of his compatriots shared, with up to 10 men in a room, or the frustration of being unable to afford the luxury of privacy that white-collar Western expatriates and Qataris themselves enjoy.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout, si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The famed Darwin's Arch in the Galapagos Islands has lost its top, and officials are blaming natural erosion of the stone. Ecuador's Environment Ministry reported on the collapse on Monday. The rock structure, 141 feet high, 230 feet long, and 75 feet wide, is less than about a half mile from Darwin Island, and it's a popular spot for scuba divers, and it is not accessible by land. Obviously, all the people from the Galapagos felt nostalgic because it's something we're familiar with since childhood, and to know that it has changed was a bit of a shock. Washington Tapia, director of the conservation at the Galapagos Conservancy, said, "The unique flora and fauna on remote islands, some 1,000 kilometers, which is about 600 miles off the coast of mainland Ecuador, are famed in part for inspiring Charles Darwin's thoughts on evolution. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.